story begins with a tense bomb disposal operation. A homeless man is holding a bomb inside a bus, demanding to meet the deputy mayor before surrendering it to the police. His request is granted, and he is brought face-to-face with Deputy Mayor Zhang Gang. Without hesitation, the homeless man makes a shocking statement. He accuses Zhang Gang of being the most corrupt official in the government. With his message delivered, the homeless man prepares to surrender and hand over the bag containing the bomb to the police, as initially agreed. However, before the exchange can take place, an explosion occurs. Fortunately, Zhang Gang's son, Jianming, a police officer, arrives just in time to save his father from the blast. Later that day, Zhang Gang and Jianming return home safely, though Zhang Gang sustains an injury to his leg and requires support to walk. As they sit down for dinner, their conversation turns to Jianming's plans. He intends to meet with Ji Tian, a businessman and acquaintance of Zhang Gang. Concerned for his safety, Zhang Gang warns his son that Ji Tian may have ulterior motives and could be trying to manipulate him. However, Jianming dismisses his father's concerns, believing it to be his duty to go through with the meeting. Their discussion grows tense when Jianming brings up the fact that he is adopted, a statement that irritates Zhang Gang, who sees it as a sign of disrespect. Jianming eventually meets Ji Tian, only to realize that he is not the only guest. A company director has also been invited to the gathering. The atmosphere grows uncomfortable when Ji Tian plays a mysterious video for the director. Panicked, the director pleads with Ji Tian to delete the footage, fearing it could endanger his position. Instead of complying, Ji Tian drops the phone containing the video into a pot of boiling water and challenges the director to retrieve it himself if he truly wants it erased. Jianming quickly understands that this is a carefully staged act intended as a veiled threat toward him. Infuriated by the manipulation and disrespect, he storms out, leaving Ji Tian and the director behind. Meanwhile, Ji Tian convenes a meeting with the senior executives of his company. He announces his decision to step down from his leadership role, citing his age as the primary reason. His chosen successor is a young man named David, whom he intends to appoint as the new president of the company. Following this decision, Ji Tian is summoned for a meeting with Zhang Gang. Unbeknownst to him, this meeting is a setup. Zhang Gang seeks revenge for the way Ji Tian treated his adopted son, Jianming. However, revenge is not Zhang Gang's only motive. He also confronts Ji Tian about the recent bombing, believing it to be an assassination attempt orchestrated by Ji Tian himself. Zhang Gang is convinced that the explosion was meant to eliminate him. To his surprise, Ji Tian adamantly denies any involvement, claiming he has no knowledge of what Zhang Gang is accusing him of. Meanwhile, Jianming is attending police briefing regarding the bombing incident that nearly killed his father. The authorities are still investigating the identities of those responsible. Despite their efforts, no substantial leads emerge. With no progress in sight, the police ultimately decide to halt the investigation, leaving the case unresolved. Realizing something was off, Jianming explained that the perpetrator was merely a pawn. This became evident from his shocked expression, as if he had not known he was holding a real bomb. The true mastermind must have been detonating it from a remote location. Jianming was determined to act swiftly if given the authority to lead the operation. After successfully convincing his superior, he was entrusted with the case and took 2 trusted colleagues with him, as he believed no one else could be relied upon. Using his sharp intellect, Jianming and his team managed to identify the individual suspected of triggering the explosion inside the bus. However, despite discovering the suspect's identity, his whereabouts remained unknown, as he had vanished from public view. Jianming's quick and precise findings impressed the police captain, who decided to grant him greater authority to resolve the case. At the police station, Jianming and his team resumed their investigation, determined to track down those responsible for the bombing. Their efforts led them to a new revelation. There was another party involved, and that person was none other than Ji Tian, whom Jianming had met the previous day. Meanwhile, in a different part of the city, Chun, a supervisor from the counter-organized crime task force, accompanied by a police officer, arrived to see Zheng Gang. They were reopening an old case, and Chun intended to investigate every government official, including Deputy Mayor Zheng Gang. Determined to uncover the truth, Jianming confronted Ji Tian about a person he was certain that Ji Tian knew. The reason Ji Tian had landed on the suspect list was due to his subordinate, Ming Li, who was highly likely to be the mastermind behind the bombing. Later, Jianming pressed for information on Ming Li's whereabouts and whether Ji Tian would testify against him in court. Unwilling to be dragged into the matter, Ji Tian attempted to deflect the questions, denying any association with Ming Li. However, Jianming applied subtle pressure, hinting that he knew more than he let on. This visibly unsettled Ji Tian, though he continued to insist he had no knowledge of the case or why his name and company had been linked to the bombing. Frustrated by the lack of progress, Jianming left Ji Tian's company building. However, instead of heading home to rest, he decided to tail one of Ji Tian's trusted men, David, whom he suspected might lead him to Ming Li, the missing suspect. While tracking David, Jianming realized that he himself was also being watched. To avoid drawing suspicion, he instructed his team to return home while he continued the surveillance alone. When he finally caught up with David, Jianming directly confronted him, demanding to know whether he had any connections with Ming Li. If David refused to answer, Jianming threatened to expose his affair with another woman to Ji Tian, as David was engaged to Ji Tian's daughter. This dangerous threat left David with no choice but to confess. With no other option, David finally admitted that he was indeed acquainted with Ming Li, but insisted that their relationship was nothing special. He explained that Ming Li had merely asked him to help procure a foreign medication called risperidone, a drug used to treat schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. This medication was also known to help manage behavioral issues, including those associated with Alzheimer's disease and autism in children. Elsewhere, Zheng Gang secretly met with a young woman named Xiao Wei. It was unclear whether she was his mistress or his daughter, but he only stayed for dinner before leaving once his business with her was concluded. Meanwhile, David escorted Ji Tian to his apartment, revealing that David was the only one with access to the residence. Without him, Ji Tian would not be able to enter, as David was engaged to Ji Tian's daughter. Given this relationship, David held a special status in the family. Ji Tian planned to officially arrange their marriage as soon as his daughter, Li Sha, returned from her vacation. After meeting with David, Jianming immediately reported his findings to the head officer and the investigator, Lu Feng. He explained that this case was far from simple. Based on his observations, Jianming suspected that Ji Tian was the mastermind behind the entire operation. Impressed by Jianming's sharp analysis, but concerned for his safety, Lu Feng advised him to drop the case. In Lu Feng's assessment, Jianming was not yet prepared to face the risks involved. After all, the case involved both the mafia and government officials, meaning that anyone who interfered could become a target. The head officer also suggested that Jianming step back, but he left the decision in Jianming's hands. If Jianming felt capable of handling the risks, he was free to proceed. Before long, the time came for the arrest of Ming Li. Jianming, accompanied by 2 trusted colleagues and a police task force, led the operation with precise execution. He was able to track Ming Li to his residence after identifying him as one of the few individuals in the city with a rare mental disorder. Without hesitation, Jianming stormed the house, only to find Ming Li's wife tending to their child, who had Down syndrome. However, knowing that his target was inside, Jianming called out for Ming Li to surrender, assuring him that cooperation might lighten his punishment. After a brief pause, Ming Li stepped outside and turned himself in. But just as he walked down to the street, a mysterious car suddenly sped toward him, hitting him with brutal force. Gravely injured and barely able to speak, Ming Li was still conscious. Desperate for answers, Jianming pressed him for information, demanding to know the names of everyone involved in the bombing. Meanwhile, Ji Tian had just finished welcoming his daughter, Li Sha, back home. Without delay, she was married to David as planned. While Ji Tian was enjoying a moment of relaxation, he received an unexpected call from an unknown number. It was Zheng Gang. On the other end of the line, Zheng Gang played a recorded confession of Ming Li, exposing his crimes and revealing the key figures behind the plot. Elsewhere, Jian Ming stopped by the home of Hui Lin, a female colleague who had assisted him in the operation. Though they were once lovers, they now maintained an amicable relationship. Jian Ming was not there for romance. He merely needed a safe place to rest. After regaining his strength, he departed, leaving Hui Lin standing silently at the door, watching his figure fade into the distance. At the same time, Ji Tian was summoned by Zheng Gang for a private meeting inside a parked car. Their conversation was long, reflecting on a past in which they had once been close friends before choosing vastly different paths to success. Then, Zheng Gang made a shocking revelation. He had orchestrated the bus bombing himself. His true motive was to frame Ji Tian as revenge for rejecting a deal with a powerful figure known as Big Boss, a deal that would have greatly benefited Zheng Gang. Driven by resentment, Zheng Gang now threatened to exile Ji Tian from the country unless he agreed to sign the contract. Unwilling to leave his homeland, Ji Tian finally yielded. He signed the agreement, after which Zheng Gang called Big Boss to finalize the deal. The following evening, precisely at 7 p.m., two crucial events were set to take place simultaneously. The first was the signing of an agreement between Ji Tian and the so-called Big Boss, orchestrated by Zheng Gang. However, the deal ultimately fell through, as Ji Tian had already anticipated the threats he was facing and knew how to handle them. The second event involved a statement that Ming Li was supposed to issue. However, frustrated by what he perceived as a delay from the authorities, Ming Li decided to retract his statement. Consequently, the officers present chose to leave and planned to return at the time Ming Li specified. Shortly after the officers left, Jian Ming received a call from his father, urging him to head to the hospital's ground floor immediately, as the Chinese tactical police force was on its way. However, just as Jian Ming reached the ground floor, gunshots rang out. Without hesitation, he rushed back toward Ming Li's hospital room, only to find his path obstructed by a group of construction workers staging a protest. It was unclear who had orchestrated the demonstration, but it effectively hindered Jian Ming and his team. Despite the chaos, Jian Ming and the tactical police force managed to locate Ming Li. Unfortunately, they were too late. Ming Li had been taken hostage by one of the construction workers, who then threw himself off the hospital building, dragging Ming Li down with him. Following the incident, Jian Ming found himself lost in thought, questioning whether his actions had been justified. His frustration boiled over when he reported to Lu Feng, his voice filled with anger. Losing Ming Li, the key to solving the case, had rendered all of Jian Ming's efforts futile. That same night, at a restaurant staff lounge, employees were enjoying their break, smoking by a wall-mounted ashtray. When the last smoker extinguished his cigarette, an explosion suddenly erupted. Moments later, Jian Ming rushed to the scene and smashed the ashtray, only to uncover something even more shocking, a corpse hidden behind it. Upon learning of the discovery, Zheng Gang immediately confronted Ji Tian, furious. The body belonged to a woman named Xiao Yu, someone they had killed decades ago. Meanwhile, back at his apartment, Ji Tian seethed as he watched CCTV footage showing David engaged in an affair with another woman. He knew this would devastate Li Sha. Adding to his suspicions, Ji Tian learned that David had been meeting frequently with Jian Ming, leading him to believe David had betrayed him. Wasting no time, Ji Tian called David and Li Sha for dinner. Once the meal was over, Ji Tian asked to speak with David privately. However, out of consideration for Li Sha's feelings, he did not resort to violence. Instead, he simply ordered David to disappear from Li Sha's life and never see her again. Later that night, as Ji Tian rested, he received a call from an unknown number. The caller was a hired assassin, sent to eliminate him. However, Ji Tian, already aware of the looming threat, was one step ahead. He turned the tables and fought back against his would-be killers. In the aftermath, he found a card belonging to David and immediately concluded that David was behind the attack. Seeking revenge, Ji Tian ordered his men to capture David. Once David was apprehended and restrained, Ji Tian, now dressed in an executioner's uniform, personally carried out his punishment. Overcome with fury, he took David's life. News of David's death soon reached the police. When Zheng Gang learned what had happened, he immediately called Ji Tian, warning him that he had made a terrible mistake. Driven by panic, Ji Tian had acted too rashly. David had been nothing more than an unfortunate victim of his paranoia. The following day, Ji Tian paid a visit to Zheng Gang's residence, seeking retribution. Instead of confronting Zheng Gang directly, Ji Tian manipulated his wife, convincing her that her husband had betrayed her. He presented a photograph of Zheng Gang with a young woman named Xiao Wei, whom he had been secretly meeting. In truth, Xiao Wei was the niece of Zheng Gang's former lover, Xiao Yu. Zheng Gang had never been unfaithful. Rather, he had been keeping an eye on Xiao Wei out of his enduring love for Xiao Yu. Watching over Xiao Wei was his way of holding on to the memory of the woman he had lost. However, consumed by jealousy, his wife refused to understand. She demanded that Ji Tian eliminate Xiao Wei, unwilling to share her husband's affection with another woman, even if that woman had long been dead. Elsewhere, Jianming had just realized a strange detail about the corpse he had discovered earlier. Suspecting foul play, he asked Hui Lin to investigate any unusual deaths in the city and compare them to the DNA of the body found. Jianming suspected that the DNA had been swapped with someone else's just before the cremation. Once he had the results, Jianming immediately visited the surviving family of the deceased, Xiao Wei, the girl whom her stepfather, Zheng Gang, often met in secret. Xiao Wei explained that her aunt had died 10 years ago in a car accident. However, Jianming revealed that DNA tests confirmed that the cremated body was not Xiao Yu but someone else. Meanwhile, Xiao Yu's real body had been locked away inside a building. After explaining the circumstances surrounding Xiao Yu's death, Jianming also showed Xiao Wei a photo of Ji Tian in case she recognized him. However, Xiao Wei seemed unfamiliar with the man, so Jianming simply urged her to recall any clues her aunt might have left before her accident. Later that night, Xiao Wei found an old file containing images of her aunt before her death. Following Jianming's advice, she searched for hidden clues and soon discovered a phone concealed inside a doll. Realizing its importance, she immediately called Jianming to report her findings. Meanwhile, as Li Sha was about to give birth, Ji Tian received a call from Zheng Gang about the very item they had been searching for, Xiao Yu's phone, which had resurfaced. Although they initially clashed, the two men decided to work together to retrieve the phone from Xiao Wei. In the end, Ji Tian agreed to handle the dirty work, but under one condition. He was not to harm Xiao Wei. Before long, Xiao Wei found herself tied up by Ji Tian's men, who demanded that she hand over the phone or face death. Meanwhile, Jianming was on his way to Xiao Wei's home, choosing to go alone without backup, unaware of how dangerous this decision was. He had no way of knowing that he would soon be facing a gang of ruthless enforcers. Growing increasingly suspicious after multiple unanswered calls, Jianming began to fear for Xiao Wei's safety. Amidst his worry, Jianming received a call from Lu Feng, who immediately asked what was going on. Jianming explained that he had found the crucial key to closing the case that very night. At the same time, Xiao Wei was confronted by one of Ji Tian's men, who offered her 10 million yuan in exchange for the phone. If she complied, she would be free to go anywhere she pleased. Meanwhile, Jianming finally arrived at Xiao Wei's home, but upon finding it empty, he sensed something was off. Xiao Wei, too, realized that the situation had taken a dangerous turn. Just as she retrieved the hidden phone, Hui Lin arrived to assist her, knowing Jianming was walking straight into danger. However, before they could escape, Ji Tian's enforcers tracked them down. To alert the Chinese tactical police team, who were already en route, Hui Lin fired a warning shot. Unfortunately, the noise also revealed their exact location to the gangsters, who were much closer than the police. Amidst the ongoing chaos, Ji Tian found himself entangled in another pressing matter. Li Sha was in the process of giving birth. His divided attention left him frustrated, and he could only vent his anger on the hired thugs who had yet to secure the item he so desperately sought. Meanwhile, Jianming and Hui Lin were caught in a tense standoff. With no escape route left, they were completely surrounded by the gang members. Hui Lin fired a shot, forcing the thugs into hiding, while Jianming managed to unlock Xiaoyu's phone, the very key to unraveling the mystery surrounding his stepfather. The content of the phone revealed a shocking truth: a photograph of Zheng Gang with Xiao Wei, who was, in fact, Jianming's biological mother. Just as they were momentarily distracted by the revelation, the gang members launched another attack. Fortunately, reinforcements arrived. The Chinese tactical police team stormed the scene just in time, rescuing Jianming and Hui Lin. With the crucial evidence now in hand, Ji Tian, Zheng Gang, and his wife could only resign themselves to their impending fate. In his office, Ji Tian stood motionless, gazing out the window, when suddenly he was ambushed by someone he had trusted. 6 months later, following Ji Tian's arrest, Lu Feng visited him in prison, urging him to confess to all the crimes he and his associates had committed. Realizing there was no way out, Ji Tian revealed the existence of a flash drive hidden inside a bamboo tree in his apartment, containing incriminating evidence against Zheng Gang. He had kept it as leverage should he ever find himself abandoned by his allies. In the end, Zheng Gang and his wife were both convicted and sentenced to death for their involvement in past crimes. Meanwhile, those who played a role in bringing them to justice were honored for their contributions. And so, the case was finally closed. The end. Moral lesson from the story: if you're going to frame someone for a bombing, make sure they're not smarter than you, otherwise you'll end up in jail while they enjoy dinner. Also, never trust a businessman who boils phones. They're probably just showing off their terrible cooking skills.